So part two of our cube and sphere on a table colliding is going to be working with the camera. Now you can manipulate the camera any way you want. You can add just a simple like, here's a location, move it over here, whoops, move it over here, here's a location, do some rotation keyframes and hope that it works. But there's so many better ways to work with your camera than that. And the best way that I find is to work with a motion path. So just taking this the way we're going to have this, I'm going to go Shift A and I'm going to add a curve, and then I'm going to add a path. And so the path is going to come in here, and I'll just kind of bring it over here a little bit. And if I go into edit mode, you can see that the path consists of 5 different points. And you can take those points and you can grab them, or I use the translate or the move tool here to start grabbing them and kind of set up a very kind of like basic curve. So I like to do this from the top, and then I can just hit the G key and I can just grab them and get them set up in 1 dimension. It's easy to forget that you can work in 3 dimensions with Blender sometimes, especially with curves, because they are kind of flat, or at least in my mind they're flat, but I can just do a lot with them. So we've got a good curve set up. That looks actually pretty darn good, and I'll worry about the 3-dimensional stuff in a little bit. So now I've got a curve set up, and one of the things that you'll notice about the curve is I'm just kind of like looking at this. You'll notice it doesn't do corners or anything like that. So if you want to do corners, then what you want to do is you want to do like a regular Bezier curve where you have handles and stuff like that. I like, for camera motions, usually you don't want to do something like that. You just want a nice smooth curve. So we're just going to use the path because it makes a nice smooth curve. It works really well with the camera. So now I'm going to get out of edit mode, and I'm going to take my camera and I'm going to go over here where you have your properties and everything, and you're going to click on these little, looks like little 2 gears with a belt on it, and it's constraints, and you're going to add follow path. Now actually, before I go do that anymore, I'm going to select the curve again, and I'm going to click on the object properties here, and instead of NURBS path, I'm going to rename it camera path. Now in this example that doesn't matter at all because it's the only path that I have. But in larger animations, naming the paths can be really advantageous, because when I go to my constraint, it says target, and I click, and if you had a bunch of paths in that target area, or for the target, you would have a whole list, and it might say NURBS path 01, NURBS path 2, 3, 4, 1000, whatever. So I like to rename the camera path, and then I really know what I'm doing. So, or what I'm selecting, I should say. So now the camera kind of moves away from the camera path, and that's not bad. I'm going to reposition it, but some people don't. You don't have to. I like it to be repositioned so the little orientation point that's at the back of the camera is also here. The other thing that's probably a good time right now to kind of switch my views back in animation. So I'm going to go back to my 3D viewport here. I can see my camera view, and I'll go back here to my dope sheet so that I can see a bunch of things here. And I might also go under the filter and turn off only show selected so that I can kind of see everything, and then I'll just close the cube and the sphere, but I can still see their keyframes. It just kind of helps me understand where I'm at when I'm starting to animate my camera. In order to animate the camera along the camera sweep, you actually animate the curve. You don't animate the camera itself, and that's something that usually trips a bunch of people up. So you click on the curve, you go down here to where it says Object Data Properties, and it's got this little curve symbol here that's only going to show up if you're on a curve. So here it's a triangle because it's a mesh object. When I select that curve, it becomes a curve object. Down here you'll see another section. It's called Path Animation, and it's collapsed. You click on the little triangle, it opens it up, and it has frames, and then it has evaluation time and percentage. Okay, So we're going to really only be concerned with evaluation time right now. I'm just going to kind of set this to be real simple. So at frame number 1, I want my camera to be at 0% of my path. So I hover my cursor over the evaluation time and I hit I. That inserts keyframe here under the camera path, and you can see it here, an evaluation time, and I've got a new keyframe there. So now I'm going to move forward in time until I feel like I want the camera to stop. So, you know, maybe about 100 frames or so, which actually, ironically enough, equals the same number of frames here. So then I'm going to go into my evaluation time, and I'm going to click on it, and I'm going to type in 100. Now you can tell it's orange, which is telling me, hey, you changed something, but you haven't inserted a new keyframe. So yet again, I hover my cursor over the evaluation time value, I hit I, and it inserts a keyframe. And you'll notice all of a sudden, the camera jumped. And if I scrub through the timeline, you'll see that the camera is now moving along the path. And I just animated my camera along a path just that simply. However, we want to move our camera. I like to have my camera move so that, like I said, that orientation point is at the line. It just visually for me is really important, but you don't have to do that. So what I will do oftentimes is I'll orient myself up along the top, and I will get the orientation point or the tail of the camera right down on that portion of the path, and I like to get it pretty darn close if I can, but it doesn't have to be exact. That's definitely good enough. And now I'm going to hit the x-axis, and you can see I'm way too high, so I'll go down and I'll drop that straight down. And we should be able to have the point right on the curve, just like that. And now, as we see our camera going, you see the camera is moving along the path quite efficiently, and I can now alter my path to change what the camera looks like. But I don't want to quite do that yet. And here's why. If we look at our camera view, as I start to change the way the camera looks, if I were to drop this down, you can see now I'm just looking at the corner of the table. So I don't want to do that. I want to be able to change what the camera is looking at. And there's another constraint that we can use that's going to help us a lot. And that is a point at, or what's also called a track to constraint. And I can take this camera and I can point it at the center of an object. So I could point it at the center of the table. And in this instance, that might work. But I don't want to do that. I don't also want to have the camera pointing at the cube, because that might exclude the sphere from certain shots, because it would be pointed directly at the cube. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to create an empty object. And an empty object is exactly what it sounds like. It's an object that is nothing. So I'm going to hit add, and I'm going to go to empty. There it is. And I just like the plane axes. You can, whatever you want. Some people like the cube, the circle, whatever. I'm just going to use the plane axes. And I'm going to lift that up just a little bit, and we'll move it back down in a second. I'm going to go over to the little orange cube here, and I'm going to rename it camera target. And again, it's just one of those things that if you have a whole bunch of objects in your scene, it's much easier to just rename it what it is, so that I can, know what I'm actually pointing the camera at. So I click on the camera now. I'm going to go to my constraints. I'm going to click track to under add object constraint. And then I'm going to click on my target, and I'm going to say add to the camera target. Now you notice the list was a lot longer here because I could choose any of the objects. And now a little bit of magic happened here, and the camera is now pointed at the center of the table because that's where my empty is. If I wanted to, I could grab my empty and I could move it to the left, and now you can see how the camera is actually shifting its view according to where the camera target is. And this is another reason why I like to put the orientation point of the camera on the path, is because that way it rotates around that orientation point. So I just have a better sense of what the camera is going to do before I actually move my target. So let's go into edit mode, And now I can grab this point and I can kind of pull it back, maybe drop it down, maybe bring it over, create some sort of a dramatic camera angle, something like this. Ooh, that's kind of cool. So we can kind of see the sphere as it's kind of eclipsed by the cube, and now I can start to work with my points to kind of create a camera sweep that has a similar distance and then has a good ending point. So now I'm going to sweep along here. And so you can see how the sphere really goes out of the view or the shot here. So I can kind of bring this back, bring that maybe out a little bit more. Let's take a look at how that looks. Oh, that's showing me the action a little bit better. But I actually kind of think I'd like to go a little higher. So now I can kind of drag this up. And that's where the camera target is so important, because now I'm kind of seeing a different shot. So I still don't like it though, because the sphere is kind of ending outside of the shot. So this is a place where I can also animate my camera target, which you probably saw coming. So I'm going to go out of edit mode, and I'm going to grab my camera target. Oh, I think I had it and then I lost it there. So I'll grab my camera target, and I'm going to insert a keyframe for location, and then I'm going to go to that ending shot here, and now I'm going to drop it down and maybe move it over just a touch, like that. And now physically it's actually below the table, but it makes a better shot. Insert my location. Now I'm going to scrub through this and kind of see if that still works as a good camera shot, even though it's animated the whole time. And if I didn't like the fact that it's starting to drop in the middle here, what I might do is I might like take the dope sheet here, and I could take my camera target and I could just grab this keyframe here, and I can just drag it to the moment of impact. And so the camera target doesn't change until the moment of impact, and then it drops the nose of the camera down to keep everything in view. I think the important thing with camera motions is to make it so that if you're doing fancy stuff like this, your audience shouldn't really know. So the viewer shouldn't know that I'm really changing the attitude or the point of the camera all that much. So super fast views aren't going to, or not super fast views, super fast changes in the view aren't really going to help me. A simple camera sweep like this is probably melodramatic enough as it is, right? I mean, that's maybe a little much for such a simple scene, but it does allow us to create a nicer shot. And I like the composition of this last shot with these two kind of corner to corner, and the table kind of like in an angle here with a little bit of negative space in the corners. I really kind of like that. So that is an excellent kind of way of creating camera motion. Do you have to use a path? No, you can use regular keyframes and location or rotation keyframes to do it. And you can use the F-curve editor to kind of control the movement, to make it smooth and everything like that. So you don't have to do this, but to do a sweep like this in quite such a curve, this is so much easier to do than if you just had, say, 3 location keyframes and then you were trying to use the curve editor to smooth that out. That would be very difficult to do and to do naturally. Whereas here, I think it's just much more instinctive. And then, of course, it's so much more editable. So once you have it, if you don't like something in the middle, so like here I saw that I might want to get a little closer for some of these shots. So I might actually bring this in and flatten the curve out a little bit, okay, to show the action a little bit more. But then what does that do to my ending, And still ends up looking really good. So I can show the action just a little bit better, and I was able to do that with just like 3 clicks. So the curve editor, or not the curve, but the paths for cameras are a really powerful tool to just be able to create a nice, simple camera motion. So anyway, this is part 2 of our little cube versus sphere animation. It's very simple, easy to do. Hopefully this helped you to add a little pizzazz camera sweep to your animation. And yeah, if you liked it, give me a like, subscribe, even better. And have a good night.